Hey Dylan, thanks so much for joining me today on Business Your Way. I was really excited when you reached out and wanted to chat about Etsy on the podcast. Initially, it wasn't something that I had thought would be a topic for the podcast, but the more I thought about it, and then I read your bio, and I was like, actually, let's have this conversation. So I would love for us to start by you introducing yourself to the listeners, who you are, who you serve, and what you do to make your moolah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sandra. I'm really excited to be here. So, my background, I'm from the Midwest here in the United States. I went to college, studied business, actually studied buying and product development in London for a little bit, and then I got into e-commerce. So, went the corporate route after college, and worked for some really big companies like Zappos and Zulily. Learned a lot from those companies, but then I married someone in the military, and you move a lot. You move a lot. And it's really hard to continue to climb the corporate ladder that way. So I was about, see, 26 at that time, 25, 26. And I was doing all these different side hustles. I was, dog walking. I was house sitting. I threw something up on Etsy and on eBay. And then I was just trying to see what would stick while I was searching for that job. And the thing I put on Etsy, it was just something I made for my wedding, made out of fake flowers. And it sold after 2 months. I got a sale and I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Like, oh no, now I have to make the thing and sell it and ship it. And so a couple months later, that took 2 months. A couple months later, I'm making over 10,000 a month. I'm applying all my corporate e-commerce principles that I knew from my career prior to the Etsy platform, and eventually scaled on to Shopify and Amazon, hired employees, and made over $1 million, and then started teaching it. So that's kind of my story. It wasn't intentional, kind of fell into it.
Nice. So,
Yeah.
what are the types of products that you currently sell on Etsy? Well, maybe you started making flower arrangements, like handmade flower
Yeah.
arrangements.
Yeah.
Um,
These are like fake flowers. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. For weddings and nurseries, like baby rooms and things. But I was primarily handmade and supplies. I dabbled in digital as well. But I mean, right now I'm working with about 3,000 Etsy sellers, and there's so many things you could sell on Etsy that you don't even realize. So
Mm.
things, digital products, they could be low price point, like 99 cents. They could be high price point. Like, for me, I bought my website template on Etsy and had them install it. I paid several $1,000s to someone on Etsy to do that. You could sell, obviously, the physical products. That's what people think of, but there's so much more. Anything that's digital, even a service, anything you could sell on Fiverr or Upwork, any type of service like that, freelance work that you could sell that through Etsy.
That's interesting because my impression of Etsy was it had to be handmade. So anything that was handmade or self-made was the
Mm.
purpose of Etsy being for makers. So whether it be a digital product or a physical product that you shipped, as long as it was like made with your hand, so it was for makers. So interesting that you can sell services on Etsy.
Yes. And one of my favorite combinations is combining a digital product with a service upsell. So like the idea of maybe you sell templates, maybe you sell like, let's say, website templates, for example, and you have like 50 listings that are website templates, and then you have an add-on that is like the full installation, and maybe that's a couple $1,000s for that person who really values their time. They love your templates, but they have no knowledge or time to figure out the installation part of it. So combining services with digital products is one of my favorite combinations.
Mm. All right, let's go back to your journey a little bit. I'm intrigued. So you
Okay.
started with fake flowers and flower arrangements.
Yes.
What did that look like after you realized that this is a thing? I can make a business out of that. Did that evolve into other products?
Yes, it did. So it was initially letters, like wooden letters that were shaped with wood. We would cut them out. Actually, my husband, my amazing husband, he would we lived in an apartment in like an urban area, San Diego, California. And we were taking a jigsaw on the apartment patio, cutting these out. And our neighbors didn't really like that. So then we moved our operation to the side of the freeway, the highway here. And we had a generator and he was doing it there. And then we bought a laser. So now we could, you could do anything with a laser. You can do wood, leather, acrylic, so many products, and expanded our product mix. So really in the first year, sold 2 core products, made about $134,000 in year 1, just with a couple products. Yeah.
Interesting. And did
Yeah.
you expand from that? Like that for me sounds to be really like time consuming to make all of that product to then on sell it. Did you get into something that was like less labor intensive to sell on Etsy?
So there's options. You can do things like print on demand. There's certain products you can drop ship. Print on demand, that's where you're outsourcing the fulfillment to a production partner. Or I could have gotten into digital. I did dabble in digital, but for me, I'm located near Los Angeles, where there's a port in Long Beach. We get some amazing, amazing products here from Taiwan that no one else has access to. These aren't even sold online from anything I've ever seen. So because I have access to these, this kind of gem of products here, we stuck with physical products, but I got my time back by outsourcing. So I would hire military spouses to the point where I was working probably like an hour a month. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's explain, like, I'm just making an assumption that all of my listeners understand what Etsy is. So maybe we should
Yes.
just backtrack just 2 moments. And why don't you give us a quick explanation of what is Etsy?
Yes. So Etsy is a marketplace where you can sell as an individual, just a sole proprietor. You could sell as a business or an LLC or an S corp or something. But anyone, I think you have to be 18, I believe, now to open a shop, and it's very low barrier to entry. Unlike Amazon, you don't have to jump through hoops to really get approved to sell on Etsy. It's very low barrier to entry, and the customers are amazing. So people think Etsy is just handmade, kind of crafty items. It's
Mm,
not at all. It's really actually a place where a lot of B2B customers end up coming to as well. And you could even find some customers to purchase like wholesale from you. You could become a vendor that they come back to over and over, essentially. So Etsy, it is a platform that is probably one of the fastest places to build a brand if you do want to have an e-commerce business.
right. And
Yeah.
so, what would make you go down the route of choosing Etsy as your e commerce platform rather than maybe creating an e commerce website or going down like a Shopify route, which seems to be what I hear a lot when people want to go into e commerce? Like Shopify is the top of the list of platforms to consider. So, why would
Yeah.
you go? Like, what's the difference between all of these platforms if you could give us some insight into that?
For sure. My questions, if someone is asking, or considering, should I start on Shopify instead?
Mm.
I ask them a couple of questions. Number one is, how quickly do you want to make money? Are you wanting to make money in the next 6 months? Is this a really long game where maybe in the next 5 to 10 years? And number two, how much money and capital do you have to spend on marketing right now? The biggest problem with Shopify is your traffic. You end up with a huge traffic problem. You could build this amazing, beautiful Shopify site. Products are all great. Your photos and everything look phenomenal, but then you have no traffic. And you look at this, expensive site and you're like, now what do I do? I have no customers. So Etsy, it is the fastest place to build a brand. Their traffic is amazing. It's a very different type of customer on Etsy versus like Amazon.
Mhm.
um, the types of products people come to Etsy for, I would say it's a much wider range versus something like Amazon or even like eBay. And it's the fastest place to build a brand. And then once you get Etsy built up, then we can funnel them to your website or to someplace else. But use Etsy for like the free marketing, basically. And it's not free because you do pay, a small percentage. It's usually under 10%, but you cannot find ads that would be that affordable because they do that for you, you know.
Right. So
Yeah.
Etsy provides traffic as
Mhm.
well as provides you with a platform or a shop to sell your products. It also drives traffic to your shop.
Exactly. Traffic. And that's the biggest problem when you're starting a site,
Yeah.
usually. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, is actually getting that market exposure, the how to how do people get to know about your shop? So once your shop's up and running, now you've got to find the traffic or the
Right.
people to bring into your shop. But like same as, if we were doing a brick and mortar shop, you can put your shop up, make it all fancy, but if you don't have the foot traffic coming into your shop, you have the same problem. You're not making money.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And people think, oh, the biggest problem is going to be coming up with a product idea. Not at all.
Yeah.
Because you could have an incredible product and an amazing product that, is an amazing value that no one's ever even heard of or anything. And no one would find it
Mm.
if you don't know how to get traffic to Shopify.
Mm. Right.
Yeah.
So with your Etsy journey, what were the trials and tribulations that you've gone through over the years to build that business, presuming that, you were just working this out as you went along?
Yes. So, one of the biggest struggles, my husband was deployed on a submarine, which when they're underwater, they don't have email. And yeah, it was 2020. So, we all know that year was rough. And I had a little, I call him a baby. He was like 2 at the time. And I was basically in the US. Well, we had, the stimulus. So Americans are receiving checks every week. And it really stimulated the Etsy economy as well. So my sales skyrocketed. I think I went from about 245,000 up to 360,000. And I was all by myself. And I thought, oh my gosh, like my employee that I had just moved to Hawaii. She was military as well. So I was cranking out orders. Like I had my child like in the bathroom, like, just an inch of water, but playing in the bathtub, I'm like packaging orders. And it was a disaster, to be honest.
Mm.
So
So how are you, 2020, the couriers aren't working, nothing's being shipped. How are you making money on Etsy shipping physical products when, there are no delivery services?
so luckily in the US, the US Postal Service, they kept going.
Okay.
So we didn't lose that. And luckily, I had stocked up on my inventory from China and Taiwan in that November through January, right before my husband went on deployment. We just stocked up on everything. So we didn't have an inventory problem, and everyone else had inventory problems, but we did not.
Mm.
So we didn't do any like price gouging or anything. We
Yeah.
didn't take advantage of it, but we were well off in that way.
Yeah. What made you stock? Like you wouldn't have had any idea that that was coming down the barrel, but
Yeah.
it was just timing for you because your husband was going away and you're like, let me just stock up while he's not here. And like, what was the thinking behind that? Like that sounds terribly fortuitous.
I know, right? So our inventory was all up in Los Angeles, about an hour and a half, 2 hours from me. And when he was gone, it was actually kind of they call it like Skid Row. It's where all like the homeless people live in Los Angeles. That's actually where you go to get inventory. So I wasn't about to do that with my 2-year-old when he was gone. So
Mm.
we thought, okay, he's going to be gone for about 6 months. So we're going to get a minimum of 6 months of inventory. And that worked out perfectly for timing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so did that see you through the COVID period and like enabled you to restock? How did you manage moving through that? Or did you pivot your business at all during that COVID period?
So I would say in terms of any pivots, the constraint to the business was not inventory ever. It was my time. And because I had
Mm,
lost my employee and I was on my own, and it was very difficult to hire someone to bring into your house,
mm,
wasn't really a good idea at the time. So the constraint became time. So I had to focus on what items and products were the highest hourly wage products. and really focus on building those up and pulling levers with pricing to really maximize profit. So I wasn't overwhelmed with orders. Yeah.
Nice. And did you play with that a little bit, or did you like coming up with a strategy like that? Sometimes it's a bit of trial and error. Did that,
Yeah.
what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I would say that was my expertise,
Right.
planning, forecasting, pricing strategy. That's
Mhm.
everything I had known. So I
Mm.
built a sales plan, and planning and forecasting each month. And uh, that's, when you're good at something, you enjoy it typically.
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily that was my background. So really didn't have too many mishaps. It was pretty smooth. Yeah.
Nice. So the other question that like I've got burning in the back of my mind is, you mentioned earlier that just selling a few things, on eBay and on Etsy, just for the fun of it, then realize that, oh gosh, I could actually make some money. When was the point that you decided that let me create a plan of creating a business?
Mm.
What did that plan look like? Did your end goal look like you imagined it to be today? Or, have you just landed somewhere because you followed the breadcrumbs?
Yes, I'm very intentional about every move I make in terms of business. So it wasn't really following the breadcrumbs. I think the pivotal moment was that first year on Etsy. I had my first sale in August. A couple months later, we're doing 10,000 a month. But that entire time, I was interviewing, trying to get a corporate job again, because I thought that was the right thing to do. I was newly married. We'd just been married a few, 3, 4 months. And then that December, I found out we were pregnant. So we were going to have a baby, and I got a job offer, like my dream corporate job offer that same week. And I thought, okay, now I have to make a decision. I'm
Mm.
making over 10,000 a month with Etsy. I could take this corporate job. It was about 110,000 a year. Should I bet on myself and go all in on Etsy, or do I just take the safe corporate job? And that was the time where I decided I do not want to put a newborn baby in childcare and daycare. So I thought, okay, game on. I'm going to make way more than I would have in corporate, and I'm going to do this. So that was the point. I'm very competitive with myself, and failure is not an option. So that's kind of how the growth happened. And I'm kind of the person who says, like, how fast can the car drive, type of thing. Like, how big can we get this? Yeah.
So that initial like vision that you had for yourself, did you have okay, here's what this is going to look like in like 3 years' time? Did you set the vision that big, or was it kind of just the immediate future that you were thinking about?
I was at that point thinking about 1 year out,
Right.
um, because I think, I thought a little bit that I had gotten lucky with some products on Etsy that were a little more trending. And I wasn't sure how long people would continue to want the types of products we had. And what I didn't realize is Etsy is actually one of the last places to get trends. So a trend, you can bring a trend to Etsy, it will last pretty long, like longer than it would, at maybe like a Nordstrom or a retailer, like a higher end retailer. Trends last longer on Etsy, and they go to different parts of the world at different rates. So actually, the duration and the length of time that you could have success is pretty healthy, and it gives you time to anticipate new trends. So Etsy doesn't move as fast as maybe another marketplace. And it's kind of nice in that way.
Mm.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about trends on Etsy, but in business, we talk about, finding your niche and really narrowing in and doing the thing that you are good at. So thinking
Mhm.
about how service-based business owners can use Etsy. And the thing that comes to my mind immediately is how do we package up our knowledge as a service provider, productize that, into maybe a digital product and then put that onto Etsy. So it's never going to be a trend because we're packaging up what we are good at as service providers and then, looking to create sales on a product basis. So how would that really work on Etsy? Is Etsy really, you know, you make the most when you're capitalizing on trends, or when you're really good at what you do?
So we always really want to focus on, high income, but consistency year after year. And we don't want to build a business based on trends because then you're always chasing and that's
Mm,
exhausting. It's so
yeah.
exhausting. So what we want to do is have, I always recommend focusing on products that have high purpose or utility. So I really think, if you, any service-based business, like think about right now, are you trading your time for money? Like there's only so many hours. Yes, you can kind of pull the lever and get your hourly rate up. But at some point, if you're charging $100 an hour and the average is 50, even if you're really, really good, like you're still trading your time for money. Can you take a month off and still make the same amount? Usually not. So what I always recommend is, leveraging Etsy as a place to build consistency into your income. And they say it's passive income. I don't believe anything is passive. It
I'm with
kills
you on that. Yeah.
kills me. Yeah. And looking at the tools that you already use in your business, like you have tools, you've created tools for yourself even, and you can package those differently, right? With your marketing and maybe even with different fonts, colors, right? To make them more attractive for certain types of customers. And that's where you bring the trends in. Maybe it's fonts, colors, different types of templates, and bring those onto Etsy. You don't need a lot of listings. You could even have like 10 listings. I had a guy actually in the UK. He was a what was he? He was like a finance, like a personal finance consultant, I guess you could call him. And he had two templates, budget trackers, one for businesses, one for personal family. And he just had two types of budget trackers. He listed them. In his first 2 months, he made $7,000 the first month and the second month.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
And
what
it,
kind of, like, you get yourself onto Etsy, you take
mhm,
two products,
mhm.
budget trackers, social media templates, whatever we're using in our service-based business that we're doing. If I was thinking about, my business that I just sold, it was an event management company. So we have
Mhm.
like risk management templates, budgeting templates, program templates. We've got like marketing plan template. We've got all the templates to deliver an event, a project plan. So thinking about that, I could take that, I could put that on Etsy. How do I get traffic to that shop once it's set up? Is that then become the Etsy strategy that you're working with clients around? How do you drive traffic to your store once you're on Etsy?
Yes, absolutely. It is all strategy, and SEO is the core for this.
Mm,
Etsy SEO, very different than like Google SEO. Etsy is going to be different placement strategies and everything, different structure to it. Now, the thing is, I always say this, like you could be selling like, $1 million diamond on Etsy for like $1. And if you're missing the SEO, no one will find it. Like
mm,
so you could have the best, most amazing product and no one will find it if your SEO is missing. So that's like the number one thing you have to nail. And when you list a product, Etsy gives you a little boost. They say it's as temporary as a couple hours. So you do want to list it correctly the first time. That is really important.
okay.
Yeah.
And so are you constantly playing with your SEO on Etsy, or is it like you choose the SEO words for your product, and when you set that up, and if it's not getting traffic, do you then play with the SEO a bit more to get more traffic? Like how do
Yeah.
you massage that to then get that traffic?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. So with SEO, it's not something that you want to play with every day, right? Like day trading. You don't want to be like like looking at this every day, looking at your views on a daily basis. I always say look at it on like at least a 3-week basis.
Right.
Don't look at it any shorter than that. And there's too many variables to consider. So I would say at least 3 weeks, give it 3 weeks, and then you're going to look at your stats, your listing level stats before you make any sort of changes to your SEO. So Etsy gives you great visibility to the stats on every listing. So you know what keywords were actually working for you, what keywords you were missing, and how to optimize the listing further. And then you adjust it and let it sit for another few weeks.
And Etsy
Yeah.
gives you those recommendations, like it helps you improve your product listings?
This is kind of funny. They don't give you recommendations.
Ah.
You have to know how to look at data.
Mm.
Most people, they give you the raw data. They don't tell you what it means. And if you haven't looked at data before, you don't know what to do with it. So most people they look at the stats and they're like, okay, I'll just move on. I don't know what that meant, but looks good. you know. Yeah. So you have to know how to look at it and how to really collate it to give you actions to take.
Mm. And so, how did you work out your success on Etsy? Like, was it just a lot of trial and error, or like, how did you build your knowledge to be successful on that platform?
Yeah. So everything that I apply to Etsy, it comes from corporate e-commerce.
Mm.
That's really what it is. It wasn't that I got lucky and I'm, teaching tips and tricks for Etsy. It's really corporate e-commerce principles, business principles. A lot of these principles you can apply to Shopify as well.
Mm.
SEO is going to be the one very different thing for Etsy specifically, but I'm really taking everything I learned about in my corporate e-commerce career, plugging that into Etsy. And that's why we see very predictable results, because business principles, I don't know about you, but you could probably look at many different types of service businesses. There's common principles and levers to pull, right? Kind of, yeah.
Okay, great. That's what I was just wondering, it's just like, what did that look like? Because even though, like for me as a service-based business, I understood, you want to get away from trading dollars for hours, and that comes down to packaging and pricing, and how to increase the conversion rates to, again, not spend a ton of time converting clients. So how do you really dial in that process? But they're not new principles. They're like standard business principles around your product, your packaging, your pricing, your conversions. But for a service-based business, there are things that you're looking at, and how you reduce the hours in converting clients to increase that conversion percentage. So yeah, it's not rocket science, but it's just when you hone in on that service-based business, you can see what needs to happen by just looking at the business and seeing what's going on. So same with the e-commerce, you will look at that data and go, okay, I can see.
Yeah, it becomes intuitive. It really does. And
Yeah.
you can look at two very different types of businesses and be able to analyze it. It doesn't matter that, let's say you didn't have a massage business, you didn't have a website building business, but you know how to pull the levers because the principles are the same.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest like challenges and hurdles that you've faced along that journey to building, a really successful Etsy shop?
I would say knowing when to outsource and outsourcing early enough. I
Mm.
think that's something I continue to work through now in our coaching business, is always looking ahead and anticipating needs for labor and people in the right places at the right times. So for Etsy, you have to become confident in being able to control your sales at some level, and knowing, okay, if I pull this lever on price, I know I will increase my demand. If I pull this lever on my marketing or on my socials, I know it will do this to to revenue, and knowing and trusting that you know how to pull the levers so that you can afford to hire someone without being worried, you know, what if I can't pay them? Because I think a lot of Etsy sellers, or solo business owners where they're the only person in their business, they know they could do more if they had help, but they're afraid to hire that help because now they're responsible for that person, you know?
Yeah, there's some fear underneath that. Mm.
Right. So building up that confidence, and knowing that you know how to control the demand in your business, and you know how to pull the levers to get more business if you need more business. That's really, I think, one of the challenges I went through. And then once you make the first hire, and you see, okay, I'm still being consistent, then it's easier to make more. But making them early enough so you're not drowning and stressed out, and doing too much and, spread too thin. It's really hard to hire when you're underwater and you're like panicking, because then you
Right.
make some bad hiring decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so true. And what I find, with service-based businesses, the common objection to hiring someone is like, what if I can't sustain that level of income and then I'm responsible for their livelihood? So there is the fear that underlies that first hire in particular. I think once you got your first hire under your belt, you're like, okay, I can do this.
Right. And that's why I love, for a new position, hiring part-time hours for it, and having a huge range. Like, I think when I started hiring for Etsy, I said it'll be between 10 to 25 hours a week. And then they're not disappointed when it's 20, but if
Mm.
if you're overcommitting to you're going to have 40 hours a week of work, well, you're really locking yourself in at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think in today's market, there is more flexibility in the workforce. Like 20 years ago, people were like, I want full-time work. And that's what they wanted, and they wouldn't take anything less. Whereas I think in this economy that we're currently in, where flexibility is everything, and people are looking more and more to blend their work life and their personal life and their home life, that flexibility in being able to employ someone and say, like, the role is for 10 to 20 hours, and that could fluctuate, every week, and it won't always be 20 and it won't always be 10. And now you've got a really good understanding, and you're like, there are now people out in the workforce who are wanting that level of flexibility in their role. So yeah, I love the way that you position that.
Yeah, it's a good time to be hiring, I've noticed. I just hired 2 people this week,
Oh,
and, yeah, it's a good time to be hiring.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
What did you hire them for?
I hired a director of operations, and then we hired another coach for our coaching team.
Nice.
Yes.
And so you still currently have a shop on Etsy, or are you just now coaching other e-commerce businesses to maximize the Etsy platform?
Yes, we do still have the shop. We also have Shopify and Amazon still open. We're looking more and more at, what the future of that might look like, as I'm really spending all of my time coaching primarily. The shop, though, for me, it takes less than an hour a month just because you can outsource everything. So, I mean, it's it's pretty easy to maintain, but because my stuff is physical products, it does kind of take over my house. Yeah.
And so that means that you find yourself like, I'm not stuck is the word that comes to mind, but I don't mean that in a terrible way, but bound to be in a physical location. So you can't be constantly like moving around lots because you've still got that physical product that needs to ship.
So luckily, I can still go on vacation because we have employees who ship it for us.
Right.
So I'm not like doing any of that, but yes, I mean, it's still like on my kitchen table. I see it, and it's always around. But you learn to live that way. But I mean, that's just of your physical products. I would say only like maybe half the people we work with do physical products. Print on demand or digital products are great if you want to just keep it much more passive.
Mm. Yeah. Nice. The how big is your team at the moment? That was my next track.
Yeah, with the Etsy side, it's just one person who runs everything.
Right.
Um, and then with our coaching company, it's now about 32 people.
Wow, that's a big operation.
It
So
is.
how long ago did you start your consulting and coaching and training other e-commerce providers on the Etsy platform? How long ago did you start that side of your business?
Yes, it was only about 24 months ago.
Wow, that's not long ago
Yep.
at all.
Right, right. And we hired our first employee about a year, not even a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Mm,
Yep.
wow, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
And sorry, go ahead.
the other thing that I was going to ask you is, how did you transition from Etsy over to Amazon and then to Shopify? And what what was the strategy behind having multiple platforms to sell products from?
Yes. So one important thing is if you are building a brand that you want to be a sellable asset, you really want to be on as many platforms as possible. So reach, that's one of the reasons. Having your own website is always a good idea, especially when you're about 80 to 100,000 in revenue per year. You'll start to save on some Etsy fees by having your own website. So really establishing your brand authority, as you start to do deals with influencers or celebrities, bigger names, they like to see that you have a website. And then Amazon, it's interesting. Um, there's different strategies you can take with Amazon, but I always recommend focusing on just having a much smaller product mix on Amazon, maybe a couple of your core best sellers, just because it is such a beast. And if you're not careful, you could lose profitability with Amazon.
Right. And
Yeah,
so what was your decision to go to Amazon was all about building brand. Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I actually did the Amazon handmade category, so not even FBA, which gave me a lot more power. And I actually was able to set my own return policies where I didn't accept returns. So there's loopholes and ways to leverage Amazon where it's more profitable. Yeah.
So much to learn on e-commerce. All right. What has been given that you now operate a service-based business with your teaching and coaching and mentoring, what has been one of your, top strategies in building that service-based business?
Yes, I would say giving away so much value. Um, give value away before people ever pay you anything. Give away so much value, and for us, that was education. For service-based businesses, it could be tools, could be a short free consultation or something, to show before you have a track record, before you have proof of concept and testimonials, get it's worth it to you to give it away to get those testimonials. Like we have thousands, we have a couple thousand and over 100 video testimonials, um you geez, around that. But um giving away value so that then they wonder, wow, if I paid this person, what more could I get? um
Mm.
and they just think the free stuff is this good. What's on the other side of the paywall? And that strategy has worked really well for us. One of my video editor actually, he called it, what is it? Play to pay or something? What no, what was it? Free to fee, maybe? Where he basically edited my first video for free on YouTube. And he said, if you like it, then you can hire me. But otherwise, there's nothing lost, just to
Mm.
try it
Mm.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the free trial scenario. Let me show you what I'm good at, and if you like it, then let's work together. But if you don't, we both walk away and we're all good.
Yes. Yeah. And that was, I admired that, and his work was phenomenal. So I thought, my goodness, yeah, that was so kind of him and generous. So that free value, I think, really helps with fast growth early on.
Yeah. Now, I've got, intriguing question, like, how was that transition from e-commerce to service-based business? So you've got now a different business model because now you're packaging up that knowledge and skill set that you have gained in having an e-commerce business. And now you're actually selling a service, even though you've packaged it.
Mhm.
What was that transition like for you?
Yes, it was. It was interesting. There's a lot of parallels. Both of those businesses, I focused heavily on organic growth. So, we got to over $1 million a month with the um, service-based business without any ads, for example, within the first like 12 to 14 months. And it was the same organic strategies with the service business as we used for the product business. Now, for the service business, I used a platform that had a lot of traffic on it that was a search engine, and that happened to be YouTube. So I used that as the top of funnel. Whereas Etsy, it's a product business. Etsy is your platform, it's a search engine. So similar in that way. And then I would say high reps and consistency in both, right? Very, very consistent, putting all your time into it. And endurance, both are an endurance game. And then hiring, I would say, for positions I've never hired for, like in the service business, like a COO, director of customer success, an entire coaching team, a sales team. Um, that I never thought I would get into sales, service sales, product sales. There are some parallels, different strategies in both, I would say, and definitely a learning curve. So I did get mentorship on the service side because it is a totally different type of business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And so, what is your day filled with now that you have both of these businesses going and you've built your service based business and you've got like a really good team, good sized team behind you? What does your day look like now?
Yeah. So it's a lot of sitting here, filming, interviewing people. Uh, yeah, I would say building the team, meeting with the team, nurturing our employees because everyone's, pretty new to the company. We have a very young team. One of my top performers, she's 21 on the team. So, you know, it's a lot of people now
Mhm.
throughout the day, never in person. It's weird. It's all virtual. Like, I think I only have a few people in the US. Most people are outside of the US. So interesting. And then, yeah, a lot of Slack. So, like constant communication, having to be really clear because there's people, in the Philippines, people in, all these different countries where you just have to be really clear and intentional about what you're saying. So, putting out fires, yeah, it's a little bit of like, your hair's on fire, trying trying to survive. That's the phase of life I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. If there was like one tip that you would want to share with others who are growing a service based business, what would you want to share with them from your lessons learned?
I would say for sure build in something passive with your business. So for me, our service is coaching, but the passive product that we have is a course. So we do have a course that we offer. So having some type of uh, you know, something that isn't tied to hours where you have to put time into it that you can sell like templates or something, getting something on Etsy. It'll be much easier to get traffic that way. I think that is really helpful because that can also build in, I would say, higher recurring revenue, especially if you have like upsells along the way. So that's a key part of it, not only trading time for money, at least building the team so it's not your time anymore, you know, that and doing that soon enough so you're not too overwhelmed to figure out how to get someone in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, hiring before you need to.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love that. All right, Dylan, it was lovely to have you here today. If my audience and the listeners here want to go, let me try out Etsy, what's the best way that they can, get a taste of what you're doing or even start to explore? What would that look like for me? Like, where would be their starting point with you?
Yeah. Yeah. On our Instagram page, actually, it's just at Dylan Jahraus. We have so much free content there. And then the YouTube channel, so much is there, as well as our podcast, Etsy Success Secrets with Dylan Jahraus. It's, a ton of free advice that gets you up and running. And it's really worth the time to at least try out Etsy if you have some templates in your arsenal that you could just throw up there. It's really worth the time. Otherwise, you will never know what type of extra passive income you might be missing out on.
Yeah. Good advice. All right. I'm going to put the links to your Instagram and your YouTube and your other social medias that you've given me into the show notes. So if anyone wants to go check those things out, they can just click and go. But thank you so much for joining me here today and sharing all of this like really good gold nuggets for how service-based businesses can leverage productizing and the e-commerce platforms for an extra income stream for their business. So I really appreciate everything that you've shared today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.